All right, I just want to recognize that Maureen Coyle is standing in for Tim Frank. You all know well, whose son is graduating from high school and can't be here, and he's on his way to Tim's alma mater at Notre Dame, Byron Spruell's alma mater as well. So Ryan, congratulations, and Tim, get back to work. All right, and for all of you, thanks so much for being here. For us, it's only fitting that on our 75th anniversary, two of the original NBA franchises are represented here. Of course, the Warriors, who won the first ever NBA championship in 1947, were then the Philadelphia Warriors. And then up against the Boston Celtics, who will be competing for the highest number of championships in the league. They're tied with the Lakers right now at 17 each, and will be going for 18. So we're thrilled about that. Also, how fitting that some of the greatest players ever are associated with these franchises. Wilt Chamberlain, Bill Russell, Bob Cousy. Obviously, it just goes to the age of this league that Bill Russell, as I've said before, is someone, along with Bob Cousy, who I can pick up on the phone and talk to about the state of the league. So while we're 75 years old, it's not all that old. I think as I'm looking out on these fantastic finals coming up, you have some extraordinary, legendary talent out there now. Steph, having achieved so much on the floor, up-and-coming superstar Jason Tatum. You have players who've demonstrated all-time resilience. I just saw Klay Thompson's dad out in the hall, and we were talking about the fact that here he is back in the finals, having lost essentially 2 full seasons. Quite an incredible story. And the competition's just been nothing short of spectacular through these playoffs. Just look at these Celtics coming off another fantastic Game 7 against the Miami Heat. And one of the things I want to make sure I touch on today, of course, although we're here to play basketball, seemingly we can't escape from a very polarized society and those issues, you know, whether it be guns, most recently, LGBTQ issues, you name it, societal issues that are just part of this league and have been part of the DNA of this league for a long time. I'm incredibly proud of our players and coaches who choose to use these platforms to speak out about those issues. And we now, in the last essentially year and a half, have formed both an NBA Foundation and a social justice coalition to help us move the ball forward in a collective manner on those issues as well. I didn't want to not mention Brittany Griner. Well, I'm here. It's been now over 100 days since she's been illegally held in Russia. I think it's something that all of us should be heard on, contacting your representatives and others. I will only say we are working in lockstep with the U.S. government and outside experts on trying to expedite her release in any way we can. Certainly, our hearts go out to her and her family, and just are eager for her safe return. And so I joined my colleagues in the WNBA in making reference to her as well. Lastly, since we were all last here, we lost a really close friend and colleague, Bob Lanier. Since I joined the league 30 years ago, he seemingly was a constant presence in the league. Many of those years he spent at the league office, first as David Stern's special assistant, then when I worked directly with him at that point, and then after David stepped down, he continued in a similar capacity working with me and my colleagues at the league office. He, earlier in his career, had been a president of the National Basketball Players Association. He, in essence, became our global ambassador. He traveled the world for the league. He was always a presence here at the finals for the community events we do in both cities. And I just want to say again, he'd be really is dearly missed by all of us, and it's just a bit of sadness to be at my first NBA Finals without him. So with that, Maureen, happy to answer any questions.
We're going to go on the right, third row.
Hi, Adam. Tim Reynolds with the Associated Press.
Good to see you.
Hey, Tim.
We agree with you. Tim Frank should get back to work, first of all. I remember in 2018, there was this notion of fan fatigue after 4 straight Cavs-Warriors matchups. We've seen 5 different franchises win the East in the last 5 years, 6 different teams make the finals in the last 3 years. You've often said you don't care who wins. But I guess from a business standpoint, how important is it that it's not the same teams every year? And is that in any way beneficial to the league that there has been a bit of unpredictability?
Sure. Tim, you used the great statistics that I could have used myself. So thanks for saying that. I mean, we've seen increased parity, increased competition around the league over the last several years. As you said, 6 different teams in the finals over the last 3 years. I mean, and when I say I don't care who wins, I mean, of course, I do care, though, about the platform that we're presenting and the competition itself. And anybody running a league wants to see, not necessarily, in my mind, parity on the floor every year, but parity of opportunity. I mean, you also want a system where the best players, the best managed teams can also excel. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing unto itself if you have repeat teams in the finals or champions, frankly, like the Golden State Warriors, that are now here back in the finals for the sixth time in 8 years. We do, though, focus a lot on ensuring through a salary cap system that teams, in essence, have the same fair opportunity to compete. And that is something we're always looking at as part of our system, something we're constantly talking to the Players Association about. And to me, that should be not just a concern shared by fans of all 30 teams, but for all players in the league. All 450 players presumably want an equal chance to win championships and be part of championship teams. So I'll only say I'm pleased where we are. I'm thrilled with the teams that are here in the finals. But it's something, at least in my time in the league, I think we've incrementally improved the system every time along the way so that we could have more and more top-tier teams and more competition throughout the league.
We're going to go right here on the left, second row.
Chris Haynes, Yahoo Sports.
Hey, Chris.
See you. Injuries always been a part of the WNBA, and load maintenance, load management over the last few years. You talked about this before about looking at the potential reduction of games in the regular season. Where do things stand with that right now? Is that something do you see that can be beneficial, or this is still up in the air?
So, Chris, to your point, it's something we've been talking a lot about the last few years. And I'm not against potentially changing the format of the season, even possibly shortening it a bit, if we can demonstrate that that's going to have a direct impact on injuries. And for example, last season, we played 10 fewer games and essentially had no impact. People seemingly quickly forgot. I mean, again, it was a function of COVID and our need to start the season later and end later, but we played a 72-game season instead of an 82-game season last year. And yes, it's true, if players aren't on the floor, it reduces the chance they can get injured. But as I've said before, what we don't see is increased numbers of injuries as the season goes on. It's not as if because of fatigue over the course of a season, you see more injuries. We do see a connection between actual fatigue, for example, from back-to-backs or threes in a row. We think that potentially can lead to more injuries. So I think the way we're trying to look at it now is rather than think about reducing the number of games, we're both thinking from a competitive standpoint, is there a way to improve what to many people is a long regular season? And one of the ways we're thinking of doing that is an in-season tournament, something we've been talking a lot about. We're not there yet. We continue to talk to the competition committee about it, our team governors, the Players Association, to see, is there a way throughout the season to create more meaningful games, more games of consequence, potentially a tournament that would arguably replace some of the regular season games, but would be more meaningful. So I think generally we would be operating in the same footprint for a season, beginning roughly the same point in October, ending around mid-June. but enhancing the competition in certain ways. And you, just real quickly, you mentioned load management. I mean, that is something that we are concerned about at the league, meaning that we want to make sure we have a system where our best players are incentivized to be on the floor. At the same time, we obviously don't want to see them injured. And so what we're hoping is we can all work collectively, the 30 teams together in a non-competitive way, together with our Players Association, and figure out what is optimal on these players' bodies so that they're incentivized to play, but aren't overdoing it to the extent where they end up playing too much and pushing through injuries that ends up hurting their careers.
On the right, fifth row, Jeff.
Jeff Zilgett, USA Today.
Hey, Jeff.
Hello, Adam. So for the second consecutive season, a player who finished second in the MVP voting did not make first team All-NBA, but the player who finished third made first team All-NBA. How much consideration is being given to altering that to mirror the All-Star, where it's 3 front court, 2 back court, or no positions at all, into the larger context that it also has an impact on player salary and contracts?
So a few things packed into that question, Jeff. In terms of determinations for All NBA, I think a fair amount of consideration is going into whether we should just really, the way it works now, the media should just be picking the top players as to be picking by position. I think we're a league that has moved increasingly towards positionless basketball, and the current system may result in some inequities just based on the happenstance of what your position is. So that is something we're looking at. It's something that we will discuss with the Players Association because it has impact on incentives in players' contracts, and it has, in deep meaning for their legacy as well. So we will look at those things. In terms of the ultimate selection process, and to your point that in some cases can have a direct financial impact on a player's contract, right now we agreed with the Players Association to use those designations to trigger certain bonuses in players' contracts, frankly, because we couldn't come up with a better way that would feel objective to everyone involved. I think we all recognize that doing it on a pure stats basis or just using analytics, there'd be unfairness there because it doesn't pick up the intangibles. Certainly, I don't think anyone wanted the league office to do it. And so we came up with this proxy for the media to do it. I understand, though, from a player standpoint, saying, can't believe the media has been given this power over me. I will say when you have 100 media members essentially on the panel, it seems to work its way out. But we're going to discuss that with the players and sit down once again and see if there's a better way to do it.
We're going to go in the middle, sixth row, Tanya.
I'm Tanya Ganguly, New York Times. I wanted to follow up on the news today that there's been a bid made for the Portland Trail Blazers, and then the Blazers saying that they're not for sale. Do you expect that team to be sold eventually, and is that a stipulation in Paul Allen's trust?
I don't know all the specifics of Paul Allen's trust. What I understand is that Jody Allen, who is Paul Allen's sister, is the trustee of the estate, and that at some point the team will be sold. I don't have any sense of the precise timing. I read that same statement today in which she or someone on behalf of the estate said the team is not currently for sale, but at some point it will be for sale. I mean, this is a hugely complex estate, and even though it's already been several years, these things can take time. I mean, having said that, everybody has an interest in a smooth transition. I think Jody has been an excellent steward of the team. In the meantime, I'll say Portland has been a wonderful community for the NBA. The team has been there over 50 years now, and our preference, my preference, would be that team remain in Portland as part of this process. So it will work its way out, but I know Jody and her advisors are very focused on it. So as to the timing, that is something that her brother left in her hands.
On the right, second row.
Hi, Adam. Joe Varden from The Athletic. As you look ahead to next season, do you anticipate that a positive COVID test will still be a disqualifying event for league personnel?
Boy, that's a really interesting question. I mean, because of course now, and I don't know if it's analogous or not, there are other viruses where the flu, for example, historically, it's been a determination from the player and team or player's doctor as to whether it's appropriate for them to be out on the floor. Ultimately, I think that's a bigger issue than the NBA. I don't think we're looking to be a trendsetter. I think we want to be mindful of the impact that an infected player could have, not just on other players on the floor, other people who are in the arena. You know, we have an issue right now with broadcasters who are out with COVID. So it's a pretty close community. So that's an area where we've had a fantastic panel of doctors who've been working with us since March of 2020 when we shut down. And I think we will both look to them to make a recommendation, but then we'll look to see what's happening in greater society as well.
Next, we're going to go to Tim Bontemps, 6th row on the right.
Well, Adam, Tim Bontemps from ESPN. In December, we have the next round of potential opt-outs on both sides in the CBA. 6 years ago, when you guys were in that position, you guys were able to come to a deal at the time and reset the CBA. Do you anticipate that will be able to be the case this time, where you'll come to an agreement this winter and be able to get things wrapped up before the opt-out date?
Tim, I think it's a bit early to say. We at the league are just getting to know my new counterpart, Tamika Tremalio, who's the incoming executive director of the Players Association. She's someone we had known prior to her taking on that role. She had been an advisor to the Players Association. She had been a former colleague at Deloitte of Kathy Engelbert's, the commissioner of the WNBA, Byron Spruill, president of basketball operations. So some of you know, and I'm in the process of building a relationship with her. What was effective last time around was using that opt-out as a self-imposed deadline by both sides. I mean, I think we all know that for any negotiation, seemingly collective bargaining in particular, deadlines are really helpful to get people to push their best offers across the table. So I'm hoping, you know, we're always discussing things, the league and the Players Association. And just lastly, I'll say that this whole process of dealing with COVID protocols, shutting down, reopening a bubble, et cetera, has brought us all much closer. I mean, we never used to talk as much as we do now. I mean, I'm not always crazy about virtual calls and Zoom, but because of that technology, it's allowed us to have at least daily calls for the last 2.5 years. So I think if you have strong relationships, it's very conducive to getting a deal done. So I am optimistic, though, that we can move quickly.
Just to follow up really quick, is it safe to say that a similar blueprint would be in place in terms of your hope being that you'd use that December deadline as a bit of a buffer to get this thing done in sort of a similar process if it works out that way?
Yes.
We're going to go on the right, 3rd row, please.
Hi, Adam. Ryan Leong with NBC News Radio. There's some talk I hear that the NBA may be expanding to Seattle and Las Vegas after the 2024 season. Your thoughts on expansion? You mentioned top-tier talent. Of course, you'd have more players being able to play in the NBA. Would that affect at all the level of talent because of expansion?
So just to answer the first part of your question directly, that talk is not true. At least maybe there are people talking who aren't at the league office about us potentially expanding after the 24 season. We are not discussing that at this time. As I've said before, at some point, this league will invariably expand. It just is not at this moment that we're discussing it. But to your question, one of the factors in expanding is the potential dilution of talent. As I've said before, I find it remarkable that when you have the second most played sport in the world after soccer, you know, tens of millions of, now just talking on the NBA side, of young men playing this game, and then you have the 450 best in the world in this league, that there's a few of them who separate themselves even among those 450 as the very best of the best. But there is then a fall off, a drop off in talent after that. So expansion does create a certain amount of dilution. And even if at sort of adding another 30 players or so, they're roughly comparable, there still are only so many of the truly top tier super talents to go around. So that is something on the mind of the teams as we think about expansion. But those are wonderful markets. You know, as again, I've said before, we We were in Seattle. I'm sorry we're no longer there. We have a WNBA team in Seattle in a almost brand new building that's doing spectacular. And Las Vegas, where we'll be at our summer league in July, has shown itself to be a great pro sports market as well. So we'll be looking at some point, but there's no specific timeline right now.
On the left, Steve.
Steve Ashburn at NBA.com. Hi, Adam.
Hey, Steve.
You've got a coast-to-coast finals on your hands here, and the possibility of extra flights cross-country by your teams. I know there are travel days built in, but are you a little bit nostalgic for the old 2-3-2?
Not one bit. Honestly, that was one of the first things I changed when I became commissioner, is moving back to this 2-2-1-1-1 model. It just feels, as long as the flight is, and I flew from New York today, yes, it's a long trip going from coast to coast, but we just feel it's better from a competitive standpoint. It always felt to me in all my years in the league before we switched back to this format that, first of all, the players are used on their bodies to the 2-2-1-1-1 format from the earlier rounds. And it just always felt that it was never even sure where the unfairness lay, but the three in that second city just felt long and arduous. And so we have beautiful planes in this league. It's a long flight, but and again, it's tough on everybody's body. It's tough on the media having to go back and forth across the country, but it feels still like it's the right format.
On the left, second to last row.
Adam over here, Ron Krojcik from the San Francisco Chronicle. You've referenced the WNBA a couple times. There's been a lot of talk about expansion in that league, and particularly here, there's been several groups interested in bringing a team to the Bay Area. What are your thoughts on that possibility and specifically this market?
Number one, this is a fantastic basketball market and has historically been a great women's basketball market as well. For those may recall, there was another league that formed, the ABL, that at the same time that the WNBA launched, and they had a successful team here in San Francisco. And the governor of the Warriors, Joe Lacob, has talked also about bringing a WNBA team here, and they're obviously great operators. So I'm definitely in favor of it, but again, I will defer to my colleague, Kathy Engelbert, who is the commissioner of the WNBA. I know she's talked about the desire to expand. At the same time, she's very focused on having a strong economic model with the current 12 teams. So, I mean, I think similar to what I'm saying on the NBA side, I mean, although she's got a lot more expansion, down the road probably than we do, but I think she's doing a fantastic job running that league. And I think once she feels that the sort of all the proper building blocks are in place with the existing 12 teams, no doubt she'll turn to expansion, and I'm sure San Francisco will be on her list.
Sixth row in the middle, Kevin.
Kevin Arnold, ESPN.
Hey, Kevin.
What's the current status with China, both broadcast, politics, ping pong diplomacy? Are you in regular conversations with the regime and broadcast partners there?
We are not, if I heard your question correctly, we're not in regular contact with the regime, I think, is that what you said? I mean, we do talk to our broadcast partners there. As I think everyone knows, we went off CCTV, Chinese Central Television, in October of 2018 and 19, I'm sorry, of 2019. And then we remained on Tencent, their streaming service in China, throughout. And then CCTV decided to put us back on the air a few weeks ago, and which was the continuation of which is a continuation of a essentially 35-year relationship with CCTV. My position is, and I've said this many times, that I think engagement is positive, particularly through sports. I think to keep people safe and prosperous, that using sports as a platform to keep people around the world talking is critically important. At the same time, I don't think it's inconsistent with our values for our game to be broadcast in China and 200 plus other countries in the world. So that's where things stand. We are not immune from the geopolitical forces that I read and hear about on a daily basis. I will add, though, that I find that in my discussions with leaders in the US, there still seems to be a distinction between the politics around doing business in China and the policy around doing business in China. From a policy standpoint, virtually every Fortune 100 company is doing business in China. We have enormous, humongous trade relationship with China. So I've said virtually all the phones in this room, the clothes you're wearing, the shoes you're wearing are made in China. And that it's, from a larger societal standpoint, I think this is something where we have to look to the US government for direction. And if people are suggesting now that we should no longer have trade relations with China, and I don't think they are, that's a huge global issue that on one which we will follow the lead from our government. But very specifically, I think it's a positive thing right now that we are exporting this Americana, NBA basketball, and the messages that come with it to China.
On the left.
Sorry, let him
Real
finish.
quick between 19 and the present day, do you have a sense, ballpark, of the aggregate loss to teams in the league?
As I said before, it's been in the hundreds of millions of dollars. But we accept that, and I said that at the time when we said we stand behind our players and team executives, their right to free expression, whether about issues in the United States or issues in place in the world. If those are the consequences, that's what I mean, that our values travel with us. And others, as you know, since then have spoken out about their views around China and other places in the world. And if the consequences are that we're taken off the air or we lose money, we accept that.
On the left, Mark, in the back.
Mark Spears, ESPN's Landscape. And the All-Star break a year ago, there was a lot of concern about the lack of black head coaches in the NBA. And now there's, with the addition of Darvin Ham, there's 15 with the opening still available. What do you think has changed during that time? And I know I've talked to Mark Tatum a lot about it, but what kind of things have you guys done in the last couple of years that you perhaps made teams more aware of qualified African-American candidates in a league that's predominantly black?
One of the things we've done, I've talked about this before, and this isn't unique to the NBA, and I've learned this from other businesses, is that you have to talk about these issues all the time. I mean, if you care about diversity and inclusion in your workplace, you got to look at the data, you got to constantly present it to your colleagues, to your department heads, to your teams, and it has to become a focus. And it's my job, in part, to say that's a priority for this organization. At the same time, having said that, while I'm particularly proud of those numbers, and roughly 50% of our head coaches are black now, the goal is that that's not newsworthy, and that when people are hired, the first reaction isn't the color of their skin. I don't want to be naive either, though, because I know that what we do in this league is important symbolically, not just for sports, but for other industries, and people watch us all around the world. I'm also putting aside the color of the skin of those coaches. What we're also seeing, and this is something we very much focused on, is the emergence of a whole new class of former players who have moved into head coaching positions. Incidentally, thank you, Greg Popovich. I mean, he practically runs an academy there for future coaches, and not just coaches, but team executives. I mean, he's done a fantastic job. And what we see at the league office is that if we focus on the issues, and I remember Rick Carlisle came to us as head of the Coaches Association in the league a few years ago, to Kathy Behrens, who's here with me, and Orr Stewart, head chief people officer at the league, and said, we all collectively need to do a better job. And one of the ways we decided was, again, technology helps, having a better database so that head coaches who are looking for assistants or team governors who are looking for coaches had a database which we could quickly see who's available, who's interested in coaching, how much experience do they have. So, I mean, these changes come only incrementally. It doesn't help just to bang the pulpit and say, go do this. I think you got to work with people. You got to understand what the obstacles are. And the follow-up to your question, which might come, is what about the rest of the positions in the league? And I'm proud of the job we've done in the league office. we're making a lot of progress in terms of general managers, team presidents, both on the basketball side and the business side, but more work to be done.
We're going to take two more questions. Gary in the center, fourth row.
I'm Gary Washington, Boston Globe. The Celtics are preparing an application for an all-star game. They haven't hosted since 1964. Would you encourage such application? And are NBA cities starting to line up applications? Or are you having trouble getting cities to want to host all-star games?
I encourage that application from Boston. It's a wonderful city. Obviously, we'll be there soon. There was a period, I don't know, maybe it seems 10 plus years ago, where it became disfavored to have all-star games for whatever reason, and now they're back. I got a long list of NBA cities that would like to have all-star. It's not even a game anymore. It's not even a weekend. It's a week of activities. We're thrilled to be in Utah. It's not even just Salt Lake City next year, but it's Utah and it's Salt Lake City environs of, they push it out to skiing and hiking in the mountains and everything else. So it's, for us, we only have that as our neutral site event, meaning where the league can host guests from around the world and has lots of tickets. We're scrounging for tickets here like everybody else in San Francisco, and we'll be in Boston. So it's a great opportunity for us, and also just we love it as a week to shine the world's attention on basketball.
On the left, second row, Melissa.
Hey, Adam, Melissa Rowland, Fox Sports. You mentioned all of the great work that's been done in terms of diversifying the coaching ranks, but no woman has yet shattered that glass ceiling. And you have coaches like Becky Hammon and Natalie Nakase that recently went to the WNBA because they weren't finding that opportunity here. I'm curious, is there any work being done on the grassroots level to try to shatter that ceiling?
There is, and I'm glad you raised that. I would say about Becky Hammon, again, she had a fantastic position at San Antonio Spurs, and I think, and got a great head coaching job in the WNBA. And I think she herself said, the last thing I think we'd want that to be viewed as a step back, that she is a head coach in the WNBA, and with a terrific opportunity. But I've said it before, and I should have said it earlier. There is no reason that women shouldn't be head coaches and assistant, and more of them shouldn't be assistant coaches in the NBA. There's no reason why there shouldn't be more women officials. We've made progress in both those areas. Around the league now, there are a lot more female assistants at our teams, but we do have to break through that glass ceiling. And I would say, I think in the same way we've made progress in terms of Black coaches, it requires constant dialogue, requires like making sure there are a pipeline of women who are coming up, who are known to our teams, that we sort of break down the old boys network to the extent one exists, where maybe it's not intentional bias, but people hire their friends, people hire the people they've worked with before, people hire the people they know. So we just got to stick with it. But I would love to see that breakthrough happen sooner rather than later.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Adam. Just a reminder that the transcripts will be available on Media Central.
Thank you, Maureen.